Okay, people, welcome to another episode of the Leicester Lives podcast in association with Nolita Coffee NYC. Big news coming from that brand very soon. More to follow in future episodes. Now, as before, favour to ask, if you're watching this on your mobile telephone, television, on your tablet, hit like, hit subscribe, leave us some feedback, and follow us on all our social media channels. We're on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, and on TikTok. Now, old friend of mine here today. Really looking forward to this one. It's Army John Conroy. John, thanks very much for coming into the studio, being a guest on the Leicester Lives podcast.
Thank you very much, Justin. Greatly appreciate the opportunity to give my story.
Thank you, John. Now, let's roll all the way back to the beginning. Tell us about growing up in Leicester.
So, I was born in 1980. A great era, probably the greatest of eras for me. I was born to Mixer in Lynn, and I grew up, the first 3 years of my life was in St Matthew's. Absolute dream of a place back in them days. Up until sort of 83, that's when I started to go to the school, Taylor Road School, and then we moved across to Harrison Road where my mum still lives now. So I moved out about 1983-ish to that area, and I moved to Belgrave itself, which was, again, another fantastic area to be in, very lively, and very multicultural. I've come from, a multicultural background, and still today it's the exact same sort of thing. So Taylor Road School, I was there from sort of 4 to 11, 3 to 11, and then I moved over and across to Rushmead, which again, as we've previously discussed, it's a very multicultural school and environment to grow up in. And there was only possibly sort of like 6 white kids that went to the school. There was a couple of black kids that went to the school, a couple of black girls that went to the school, and we were the sort of 3% of that multiracial school, because it was predominantly an Asian school. So up until then, it was, a fascinating and wild adventure sort of from growing up, because although I was going to school and stuff, my parents were very much what I'd class as, very outgoing, adventurous. Some would say prolific shoplifters, but I would say they just had a very good attention to sort of earning money. And it was brilliant. I loved my childhood. I loved everything about it. After leaving school, I went to college, to Charles King College, and I sort of bounced around a couple of different colleges. Went to Leicester Southfields, which is the old cattle market, now converted. And I was doing, I did a bricklaying course there for sort of like 12 to 16 weeks, getting paid 40 quid a week for doing that. And I had an opportunity come about. One of my friends was working for a company called Alert Systems over in Colville, and it were doing security and alarm installation, sort of cameras and monitoring systems. And I was like, I could, I'd like to take a shot at it. I'd been a bricklayer and I'd done little bits and pieces, but I wanted to be an electrician. It was just one of them things where the course weren't available at the time, so, I got onto different courses. I've never been one to sort of sit around waiting for anything. So I eventually got interviewed for this job, and sort of 16, 17, I was sort of working all the way from home. I was always away. It was giving me not an inspiration, but a natural outlook at life. I've been away from home all the time, and I loved it. It was great, travelling up and down the country with probably one of my best mates at the time, Lee Maguire. And then I was going to college one day a week with doing this electrical course, and I got this phone call saying, we've got some bad news, if you haven't got a driving licence, we can't really keep you. And I was like, well, I've got a driving licence, it's just, I'm waiting to do my tests, and it's difficult for me to do my driving test because I'm not here all the time, I'm working away, the schedule, you're the one that's giving me the work, so, I can't just like jump in and out of where I am, and I ain't going to be able to get my test done. So they let me go, and I was devastated. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It's the first time I'd ever I was made redundant, but I just felt like I'd lost everything because I'd been so used to earning the money all the time and working. And while I was working away, when I was working back in Leicester, I used to work as a glass collector. Started work at 14, working at the Latimer Ward Club. And I used to collect glasses, wash them all, make sure all the shelves were restocked and refull. And I was earning decent money, I was earning like 50, 60 quid a week doing the glass collecting. I'd be working maybe 6 days if I weren't working away. And then I'd be working a full-time job as a alarms installation sort of apprentice. And I'd be earning between 400 and 600 quid a month, doing that. So I was pretty good with the money and earning stuff. And after that, it was like, I never want to be in this position again. I never want to feel like insecure about where the next paycheck's coming from. And I'd seen an advertisement as I was walking out the college, and it said, Army be the best. And I was like looking at it, and I was thinking to myself, I could do that. Which then got laughed at when I got home. Because my mum and dad, I told them, my mum's ex-military, and she's always been quite diligent with the way that she's my upbringing and stuff. And she's already instilled military style, thinking with me as I was growing up. So it was something that had not been pushed or pressurised into me, but it was always something that I could look at. But the only thing that I didn't like about it was I didn't want to be told, and I didn't want to be shouted at, and that was probably the making of Army John, really. So as I told my dad about it, I told my mum first, because she was always the one that I could go to if I needed something light before approaching sort of the little boss. And she then said to me dad that he's looking at joining the military, and he kicked off and he was like, he's never going to do this, he's never going to do that. And it weren't the fact that he didn't think I could or couldn't do it. It was the fact that the way that I was brought up, there was no bullshit. It was like, if you were wrong, you were wrong. If you were right, you were right. And if anyone was shouting at you and pushing you around, you stood up for yourself, and you just didn't take no shit. So, I'm grateful for the kind of upbringing that I had. And it kind of spurred me on even more so, because then, as I was saying before, me and my dad were very much best of mates, but very similar, but also chalk and cheese, because I would just generally do stuff, even though I knew that it'd probably be right. I would just do stuff just to make sure that he knew that I was also right. So, we can't... I would just say stuff to him just to wind him up and just get a reaction from him. And I'm sure deep down he loved it.
So would you say, John, the first time you saw that poster was probably the first time you've ever thought, possibly the military is for me? It
was the only time. I mean, from everything that my mum had said, and I've had an uncle that was in the TA, and it was the territorial side of the army. It wasn't something that I'd ever looked at and thought, that's, this is what I'm doing when I leave school. I was always physically fit. I always kept myself fit, always kept myself, ticking over. And it got to a point, it just got to a point where I looked at that poster and I seen it, Army, be the best. And I thought to myself, that's me, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best version of me. And that was the biggest step that I had to take. I mean, the second biggest, because the first one was telling me mum and dad, really. Because I knew that my mum would be all for it, but my dad, he took some working out, he did. He had to come to the interviews and stuff to make sure I was making the right decision at the time. But again, I was only 18 when we started the process.
So you see this poster.
I see the poster.
Then you're down to the recruiting office.
Yeah. Mr. Daz Cole, my recruiting instructor, recruiting sergeant, still remember him to this day. Great guy, very intelligent. He was the recruiting sergeant for the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Anglian Regiment, which is the regiment that I eventually joined after I finished training. He was just, his appearance, his bearing was, he was starchy, he looked rigid, he was very well mannered, he spoke really, really well. There was no bullshit. You just got that feeling that he was being honest, open and honest with you. But you knew where you stood because of his honesty, and that was fantastic. He made the process very, very easy and achievable, throughout, because you do have different assessments.
I was going to say, what is the process, John? So you go down to the recruiting office.
Yeah.
How does it work from that point?
So initially you go in, you have a primary interview, and you work out the instructor or the recruiting officer will then give you a pictured diagram of different areas that you can work in. Now, luckily, I've actually worked in the recruiting industry, so I know all the processes, the way that they go. So you're looking at the diagrams, and you can do this, this, and this, and everything's achievable, providing you've got the right qualifications. So it's nothing like out of the ordinary, unless you want to be an officer, in which case you need to have your sort of A-levels. If you've got a degree, it's even better. And then that's a different path. So I've been looking at this poster, and I was umming and ahhing about being an electrician. I could join, this regiment, these electricians. And then I thought to myself, I've always wanted to be in the thick of it. So there was all different aspects of it. Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, Royal Logistics Corps, you had the infantry, they were on the front line, Army Air Corps, you had, there's everything is there. And the recruiting office is 3 different services, so you've got the Army, Navy and the Royal Air Force. So you look at the assessments themselves, and you've got something called the British Army Recruit Battery Test, which is a BARB test for short. And it's on there, and it's very, very simple. It's just to test your ability to answer questions in a very fast and methodical way of thinking. So touchscreen tests, go as fast as you can. The faster you go, the more questions you get, the better it is for you. And then once you get your results from that paired with your academical qualifications, you can then decide on where you're going to go sort of in the military structure itself. Some jobs require more grades than other jobs. I was just straight up, I wanted to join the infantry, and that was it. So it was minimum standards, it was what you needed. But I wasn't by far minimum, grading on anything. And he was like, are you sure you want to go and join the infantry? Is this something, you have to be very physically fit. There'll be loads of different opportunities for you. The Army itself, when I worked at the Careers Office in Northampton, as you're working next to the Leicester Careers Office now, there was something like 693 different jobs in the British Army itself. It was massive. And the only thing that they never catered for was nail technicians and hairdressers. Although 9 times out of 10, one of the lads could cut your hair in the block. So it was always one of them things. And then after that, you go away and you do a 3-day attendance course. You're back and forward doing interviews here, there, and everywhere. You have to have 3 choices of what you wanted to join. Mine was all the infantry. And the regiment that I wanted to join was my local regiment, which is, it used to be the Royal Leicesters. It's now the 2nd Battalion, the Royal Anglians. A fantastic regiment, recruit from sort of Leicestershire, Northamptonshire, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire. Rutland, we're all local, and that was what I found to be fantastic, because it weren't I was escaping Leicester, because it didn't matter where I was going in the army itself, but when you're around like-minded people, you start thinking like each other. It's very not robotic, but you're all there to do a job, and you all want to be better than the person that's next to you. But by being better doesn't mean that they're any worse off than you. You're just there to make sure that you encourage them to do better for the next time. And that's what it was about. So then you go away to Lichfield and you do a 3-day assessment thing where you do like a fitness test, press-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, 1.5 mile run. And everything's timed, and how many reps you can do on these exercises. You do different carries, farmers carries, you carry 2 jerry cans, about 20 kilo in each one, and you see how far you can carry it over distances 20 to 40 metres. It's very simple and basic, but as 18, 19, it was one of them where you needed to get it into your mind that you needed to be physically fit.
Sure.
And you don't know who you're joining up with. You don't get to meet anybody else. And if you go to Lichfield and you meet people on that course, they may not be in your intake when you go into the first phase of training. So I was there with nobody, on my own, sort of the only lad that were from Leicester, or so I thought, which is a story we'll come on to. And I needed to get somebody to train me. Can we say the names?
Yeah, of course we can. Yeah.
So we had, my family's always been big townies, so I've always been in and around town, and we knew this guy called Big Zach. And Big Zach was a massive, massive influence. I've got a number of influences in my life, not just my parents, but other people that maybe some people would think very little of, and not what you'd expect them to be. But it's for no other. How can I say? It's for no other reason than how genuine these people are and how well they want you to do, not just about them. So Big Zach was there, and I know that me mum had gone over and spoke to him at the Young People's Centre. It was called Equage on Belgrave Road, and he was there as the sort of fitness instructor, kind of like coordinator. He used to take us out playing football and stuff. And as soon as he found out that I was joining the army, he started laughing, and he was like, right, we'll get you fit for this. So I was in and out of the Young People's Centre, Equage, One Voice. And it was just fantastic, because he was telling me about all the stories about, you know, Leicester, going football, what was happening at the weekend. And I already knew what was happening at the weekend, because I'd be out with my mum and dad, you know. I'd be in the town and that. So he was the guy that got me fit. He was the one that gave me the focus on fitness and how important being fit is, because if you are fit in the army, everything is very, very easy, because it's one aspect that you don't have to worry about.
Sure.
So I was there training with Zach for about 3 to 5 weeks before I got called up for my physical. I went in, and then I went to a place called Basingbourne, ATR, Army Training Regiment, which is no longer there now. And I was there for 14 weeks, actually, sort of first phase of training. So there's me on the train. I rocks up at Basingbourne, and it was like something out of this world. I got there, I didn't know anybody. I had this bloke standing there in a uniform, screaming and shouting, who's this, taking names off his clipboard. And it was very well organised. It was very well oiled. It's a proper machine. And I was like, fuck, you know, I don't know about this business. And I had doubts as soon as I turned up, because I thought to myself, this is fucking ridiculous, the way we're fucking getting shoved about. And it weren't that. It was the fact that a bit of prior thinking before you get there and preparation. I was on the ball. I had everything that I needed to. It was just because your name was being called out on the register, and it was some bloke in uniform, and you know, you was jumping to attention. So that was it. We were fired onto this bus, about 60 of us on this bus, and we went down to Basingbourne, which was a short distance, about 20 to 30 minutes drive to the camp itself, and then that was it. We was in there, locked away, kind of, pretty much, for sort of the first 6 weeks. And your training's split up into phases. So you have like, your phase 1 training is the first 14 weeks, and the first 6 weeks, you're there learning how to be a soldier, you learn how to iron your kit, you learn how to live military, you're learning what the military is about. And it was fantastic. Don't get me wrong, I was still having doubts about all of the things. But there was certain things that I didn't have to worry about. I knew how to iron. You know, I just had to learn how to iron military, that, you know, military style with creases in your trousers and down your sleeves of your shirts and stuff, and I still do that to this day. Obviously not with stay breath jeans. It's functional life skills that you just don't get. You know, nobody teaches you any of this. And then you get something called your initial pass off, where you get sort of your regimental berry, you get to wear that, and then you start feeling part of the team. Because you're there now, and you're not just representing you're representing your unit, that, you know, your battalion that you're joining. You're there, you've got your headdress, you've got your cap badge, you're in proper uniform, and it's all about representing and how best you want to be. And like I said before, it's not about being the worst, it's about encouraging other people to do better, and whilst bettering yourself. And that's what it was all about. And I started missing home, and it just got to a point where I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, because my heart and soul is Leicester throughout, and I've always loved it. It's just a fantastic place with an abundance of characters, and this feeling was just not going. I was on the phone to Mum and Dad, and I wasn't a spoiled kid, but if I needed something, if I wanted something, it was going to better me, you know, I could have it. And my mum and dad would look after me no matter what. And it was getting to a point where I was like, I don't know what I need. You know, I don't know if I want to be here. And when they came down for the pass-off, because you do a little parade and stuff, it kind of reinforced the fact that I was there, because I was there to prove people wrong. Because, I mean, growing up, I weren't the best. I weren't the best kid. I was different from everybody else, and the reason why I was different is because I had more of a mature adult head on my shoulders. With me being in the pubs and stuff, most of my friends were all 10 years older than me.
Yeah.
They were all drinking. I'm 10-year-olds out there, on my pop, and all my mates were all getting ready to go Crystals or Pally or Birdcage when it used to be there and stuff. Zoops and, back in the sort of 90s and stuff, it was, I was in and around growing adults really as a kid.
And I suppose this time in Basingbourne, first time away from Leicester, first time away from home?
I'd worked away. When I worked for the alert systems, we was in and out of Leicester all the time. Sometimes be away from Leicester, on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then we'd come back, be working from the office or somewhere in and around local, or we'd be working away, Newcastle, South Shields, Newcastle, down London way. You'd be all over. But we'd always be coming back home for the weekend.
Sure.
And it was that first 6 weeks where I was not going home. But it also built a bond with different lads from similar backgrounds, because realistically the army is full of a lot of broken homes. And by I mean broken homes, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean, mum and dads have separated, mum and dads are still a part of each other's lives, but they're separated, they live with just mum or they live with just dad or something, in that sort of, it weren't 2.4 children, it weren't mum and dad at home with a dog, with your brother and your sister, and then you was away in the military. We was all very much, I don't know, feral's probably a difficult word, but we was building relationships between us, and I'm still, I joined in 1998 initially, 99, I'm still mates with them same kids now as adults, but it was shock and capture really. That's what it was, but it was also rebooting you, because then we turned into robots, and it was after the sort of 6 weeks, it was all the military aspect of everything, weapons training, drill, marching around parade square, uniformity, everybody looking the same, very, very robotic, but very much, building that sort of discipline that you needed within all the soldiers these days. So yeah, it was good. And then you sort of move on and you go on to like practice exercises where you're out and you're learning different scenario-based training. And it was good, and that culminates into a big massive exercise where you're going out, you've got enemy out there, and you're out there doing what the military do, especially the infantry. So you're learning the basics of being a soldier. And then sort of after the 14 weeks, after 12 weeks, you then get to a point where you're doing adventure training, and you go away doing all different stuff. And I've never had a fear of anything. I'm sailing off big rocks, didn't matter. I've done stuff like that, I've been to the youth clubs and stuff, which unfortunately we don't seem to have nowadays. They all seem to have gone. And it was that, I think, that gave me that courage to be, look at me, I've got no fear. I'd done it all before, it weren't something that I was scared of. And again, it was building friendships, because there were some people that couldn't do it. It was walking over mountains, it was going training, all different things, all aspects of adventure training, what it should be, canoeing, kayaking, all different things. And it was there, you're building bridges, we were crossing bridges and building friendships at the same time.
And did you feel a different person after those 6 weeks?
After the 6 weeks, it got you to a more military mindset. After the 14 weeks, obviously you have the week where you go away, you do the adventure training, and then the last week is all drill, and it was all for the big pass-off parade. And it was, it just felt fantastic. You felt like you was part of something bigger than anything. You had a brotherhood, you was there, you had it all, everybody was relying on everybody else, and nobody wanted to let anybody down, and that's what made it good. That's what made it good. And then you move on to your second sort of phase of training, where you go to Catterick, and again you do sort of 12 to 14 weeks over there. Now training's slightly changed now, because you don't go to these phase ones anymore, you go straight to Catterick. I've been an instructor there as well. You go straight to Catterick and you do 26 weeks straight through, and you go from phase 1 to finishing off. You're a soldier when you get into your unit. So it is slightly different, but the apprehension came sort of at the end of them 14 weeks. We had a week, 10 days off, and then we was going up to Catterick, which was another journey up north, just not knowing what was going to happen. For me, because that was not military orientated, it was just spur of the moment. I just jumped in to do it. The apprehension built even more so, and that was scary. Scary because it was unknowing, and you were further away from home. It weren't like you was getting home sort of after week 6 in phase 1. You could get home like some weekends if you weren't working, but with you going up to Catterick, it was a lot harder to get home because it's bigger distances on the train, good 3 hours at least. So by the time you'd finish work at say 5, you catch the train at 8. You're not getting back till 9 o'clock, and then by the time you're back, most of your mates back on Sibby Street at that time, they're all drunk. So you're coming out sober. Maybe you've had 1 or 2 drinks on the train on the way home, and then you get out and everybody's drunk, and you're like, wonder what my mate's doing. Wonder what my army mates are doing.
Yeah.
And then I ended up staying away, like staying back weekends, going out in Newcastle, going around with some of the army lads, because again it was a different mindset, different abilities. It was crazy, and that's one of the things I actually missed about Leicester. Even though I was away, I always knew where people would be, and they're in the same pub, and they're in the same pub now, and they're still wearing the same clothes, and they're still sitting in the same seats, and they're still drinking the stale beer that they're drinking. You know, nothing seemed to have moved on. But military life was fast-paced. It was fantastic. And again, it was something that I was proud of, and I wanted to make other people proud, because I didn't want people to think that I was just some horrible little shit weasel that was going to amount to nothing, end up in prison or jail, because I weren't. I was never really that sort of kid that was in trouble with the police. Never brought the police home. Although I suppose some of my friends' parents thought that I was a little bit of a rogue, because I didn't mind a bit of a tear-up either, which stood me in good stead when I joined the military, because again, we was from all over the place, and everyone's got their own attitudes and abilities. And, you know, if you got something wrong and you needed to be told, it was how you reacted to that being told. It weren't so much a punishment or a beating, it was like, you know, you fucked up, correct it, or next time it's going to be worse. Well, it never got fucking worse for me, I can tell you that. So it was always one of them things. I wanted to make people proud. I wanted my parents to go, that's our boy, he's done this, he's done it off his own back. And I think I achieved that in the end. But going back to Catterick, it was hard. It was fucking freezing cold sometimes. You had every element going up in Catterick. It was, you know, you could be there in the summer and it'd still be pissing down the rain. You could get snow, it was that bad. But again, it was one of them things. Everything's achievable, and everybody wants you to achieve more. You know, it's one of them things where it didn't matter where you were from. We're all soldiers.
And I've got to ask this question, John, because I always wondered this. Obviously, 98 you join.
Yeah.
You go through the training in Basingbourne, you do your 6, 14, you're over to Catterick.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about going to war? Because 9/11's only just around the corner, and the world's about to go absolutely effing mad. Are you thinking about that at the time, or are you just thinking, this is a career, a way of earning money?
So the way that the military works is, the infantry itself, you can be called upon at any time, as long as you finish your training and you're in your regiment. So you could go anywhere in the world. If it kicks off, you're going. If your regiment's selected, you're there, and you're there to represent, and that's how it was. 9/11 happened, and I was in my regiment at the time in Chepstow. Again, it was one of those places where we all hated it. It was a shithole, but we just lived and worked until Friday so we could all get home. Nobody wants to get stuck out in Wales, do you know what I mean? But it was, again, one of them things. 9/11 happened. We were all in around the block. We just finished Fizz. We're all getting changed, ready to get on parade again. And then we got the call up. They were like, oh, it's a possibility that we're all getting ready to go over to assist and support as and where needed. And it would have been to assist the fire services. Control and cordon most of the areas off as it was, but you know, as it stood, we didn't get the call up to go over to America at the time. But what we did have to do was go over to Northern Ireland, which was again another one of them things, another mad, crazy, you know, place just over the water. But yeah, I mean, going to war never bothered me. It weren't something. People say, you know, were you scared? No, I weren't, because I knew what I had, and I knew what support I had around me. I knew the lads that were there to protect me, and I was there to protect them. And that feeling You're not scared of anything.
So what happens then when, obviously, you end up in Afghanistan? When do you first find out about this? How do you feel? How do the other lads feel?
So generally, if you're going over, depending on what operation you're going over, depends on what it is that you're doing. You have a training package before you're going over. So the unit will know within a year where it's going in the next sort of 6 months, and everyone's penciled in to do different jobs. So we know when we're getting geared up for going training. I mean, it weren't just Afghanistan I've been to. I've been Iraq, I've been Afghanistan, I went to Sierra Leone, and recently I'm still working sort of in the industry now, although not through the army. You're not looking at anywhere that you're going. Again, it's all about the sport that you've got and what's the job that you're doing when you get over there. And, to be fair, we was patrols company when we went over to Afghanistan back in 2003. So it was going out and making sure that everybody was reassured that we weren't there. We weren't, there to make their life hard. We were there to create humanitarian aid and support. We'd go to the villages, we'd meet the sheikhs, we'd meet, all different people to ensure that they felt protected. Because they needed protection from us, but we also needed their protection, because if the Taliban came in, they could wipe out, vehicles, work colleagues. They can cause mass devastation. And it was all about support. And again, it's one of them things where you're going to have to go into an environment that could be hostile, and we call it kinetic, at any stage. So you're always there, you're always ready. But you know what you're doing because you've had the training and you've got the support around you. What
was your first impression of Afghanistan when you arrived there for the first time? Obviously a bit of a culture shock.
Yeah, so a massive culture shock, and it's not like what you see on the news. Everything is very scripted on the news. It's not like that at all. People will talk to you when you're over there. Not everybody's walking around in dish rashes. Not everybody's covered. People are there because they want your support. But when you do get there, the initial thing that hits you is the heat. The heat is unreal. And again, you get all different seasons when you're over in Afghanistan. It's not just hot. It's a shithole. They've got no it's not so much they've got no cleanliness, but all the rubbish, the trash just gets thrown out. They're not bothered where it goes, and you've got it all over the streets. They've got it all in pits. It's right next to the schools. They're burning it all off. No one cares. It's just it's sort of hell's asshole, really.
Nobody's driving a Tesla.
No, well, not yet. I bet there'll be a few there now that the Taliban have recently taken back over. But yeah, everything was weird. It's like getting out. It's like being in Star Wars, because you'd get there and you was like, I'm on a fucking completely different moon here, and it's just dry and desolate. But again, there's people there that want you. They want your assistance, and you're there to provide that humanitarian aid and support, as well as being able to protect yourself and others, as and when you need to.
And when was the first time you would say in Afghanistan that possibly things started to get a little bit worrying, a little bit hairy?
So, in 2003, I didn't have anything that was getting pretty dodgy. Again, different patrols. Other people had, different kinetic experiences, but I was pretty lucky. I did 4 months, I think, out there with nothing happening. We were there providing training and support for the Afghan National Army and providing support to the Afghan National Police. And that's what we were there. I've been a training instructor pretty much the majority of the time that I was in the military itself, and that's just through what roles you're going to get put into, and that's the thing. We're not always there for kinetic warfare. It's, again, just depends on what you're doing. Patrols and satelliting. I think with going over to Iraq, I'd been pushed onto a promotion course back in 2006, and my unit had moved to a place called Turnhill, Shropshire, and I'd been away on this training course to get promoted to corporal, and we'd heard that one of the companies had been hit, and it was my company, C Company, that had been hit at the time, not the platoon that I was in, but another one of the platoons that was in the company, and we lost a number of guys, unfortunately. Got hit with an EFP, which exploded into the vehicle but wasn't large enough to escape, which then caused just dramatic carnage on the inside of the vehicle. It went through the plate of one guy, through his back, and then through his chest. And because it lost its power, it just sort of ricocheted. It was like a marble in a mess tin. shaking it up, and there was guys that lost legs and limbs. It was, I think, 2 guys out of 6 lost their lives, and one of them lost his leg.
Silly question, really, John, but how does that make you feel? Because obviously, in a way, everything's been theoretical to this point. That first tour of Afghanistan, like you said, nothing's really got too dodgy, but then you've now seen the reality of war, if you like.
Exactly, and I weren't even in the reality of war. I was still on my training course. I was waiting to get deployed over to Iraq at the time when this had happened, and we had to repatriate the bodies. It's daft to think that you're away from it. You're out of the danger zone, but you want to be there. And it's not just wanting to be there just because it's big bravado. It's not. You're there. You want to support the rest of the guys that are in the company as well. And that's what I was saying. You're all family. It's a massive brotherhood, and as much heartache as you're going to have with something like that happening, with Luachi dying. Fijian guy, he was my boxing partner. Absolutely brilliant guy, lovely guy. No one's ever going to fill their shoes. No one's ever going to be the same, and the company weren't the same after that had happened, after we lost them 2 guys. It shook everybody up, but it gave everybody the reality of that's what we're here for and that's what we're doing. And again, when I was deployed over there, the company that I was working with at the time, we weren't patrols that time. We were doing something else. We were working with Special Forces at the time. We was doing different jobs. We were providing cordons and control for them to go in and actually, get these ringleaders, get these people that were causing this carnage, the EFPs, the roadside bombs. These are the people that we were targeting. We had a large list of these people that we were doing, and every day was a training objective. Every day it was a different operation, and we did that for 6 months at the time. And that gave us a belief that we were doing the right thing. We were doing it for the right people. So,
I was probably going to ask you this question later on, but it's probably more relevant now. And we said before we started we didn't want to get too political. And you don't have to answer this question at all, John. But looking back on eventually what happened in Afghanistan, eventually the conflict you were involved in Iraq was probably built on fabricated lies. How does that make you feel as an individual, and how does it make people in the military feel?
For me, I can't answer for anybody else, but for me, you have the full belief that you're there doing the right thing, doing the right job, and it's not always televised that way. So you could say that the military are there and they're doing this, that and the other, and they're doing it for political gain. They're doing it for monetary gain. It's not. You've got soldiers there on the streets trying to provide protection for other people, for people in that country. And if the government's just, exhausting money and resources out of that country, the blood's on their hands. We're there, we're getting paid to do a job.
Absolutely, yeah.
And whether we were lied to or not, we're still there to do a job. Do I believe that we were there under the right reasons? No, I don't. And it's still coming apparent now. But again, the British Army is not just about taking something that's not theirs. We're there doing a job. We're there to provide the protection. We're there to give the humanitarian aid and support that these countries need. We're there to rebuild structures and support that. We're building networks, and even now to this day, I'm now operating over in Iraq now under private security, a private contract. We're rebuilding the resources. We're trying to give back to to the people that are actually there trying to kill us. That's difficult. Did we bring it on ourselves? I don't know. But as a young boy, a young-minded soldier at the time, I'm there doing the best I can, providing the support to the people that need it. And that's what I've always believed. And that's not how I sleep at night. That's what I believe. I was there to do a job. I weren't there to kill or anything else. I'm just there to provide the support that they needed. And unfortunately, we lost troops when we did.
What would you say was the high point of those tours? Because obviously, we know what the low points are going to be. You lost guys out there, and as you said, the company never really recovered from the loss of those particular individuals. But there must have been some high points as well.
So, again, as I touched on before, we were working with Special Forces. We were taking a lot of the bad guys off the streets. We were finding a lot of the ammunition support groups that were there, keeping the weapons, keeping the explosives, the EFPs, the bombs and bullets that were there to kill the troops. We took a lot of them off the streets. We were the men that came at night, and that's what we were branded when we was over in Iraq. Dusty warriors, whatever you wanted to call us. We were there doing a job that's provided the support that the infrastructure needed to rebuild itself, but we were there protecting everybody. And by taking these individuals, by getting these ringleaders, breaking down these support networks, they were the high points. It's not just about bombs and bullets in the army itself. I mean, you could have high points on a Wednesday night in the NAFI. It was just one of them when you were there, and it was all, everybody were there enjoying themselves. It was a brotherhood, but it was always like an adults youth club. Everybody wants everybody to do well. And I can't reiterate that enough. And those people that don't want other people to do fucking well, fuck them.
Absolutely.
You're there, you're a family at the end of the day, and everybody lived for that, lived for the laugh, and it was a lot of banter. And it's just one of them things. The army is a massive youth club. There is nothing that you can't do in the British military. Nothing, whether it's any courses that you want to do, education, university, the army will push and push and push until you achieve what you want to achieve. So you can be the best at what you are.
So you leave the army after 14 years.
That's correct.
Did you think then you'd be going back to Iraq and Afghanistan?
So, again, when I left the military, I was in two minds of what I wanted to do. So I've done a couple of years in the maritime industry, working on the boats with the anti-piracy, working all over Mozambique, Gaul, Sri Lanka, Dar es Salaam, South Africa. I've worked everywhere. I've worked on the Indian Ocean. I've worked, everywhere, all the sort of high risk areas. And that was something that I wanted to do just to see whether or not it was just something different. I wanted to say that I've done and I've experienced. But again, there was always this calling of getting back out to Iraq or getting back out to Afghanistan. Luckily enough, I got taken on with a company called Aegis at the time, which was about 2015. And when I came back from working on one of the boats, gave me notice in, said 30 days, I'm off. Well, I was only back for 8 days, and then I was shipped straight out back to Iraq over in Baghdad. And again, we were there providing support to clients that were needing to operate in different areas. I've worked with a company called Lockheed Martin. They provide infrastructure for the aircraft, for the Iraq Air Force. So they're there helping to assist with the planes, anything breaks down, they're there as a support system. And again, it's teaching those guys how to fix their own planes. Again, fantastic. I did that for a good 2-3 years before then getting promoted, looking for promotion and moving into different areas from close protection into operational management, which is an area that I'm sort of working in at the moment. Although I'm sort of human resources and compliance now. It's just something that I've worked myself up to into different areas. So there's nothing that I ain't done from sort of 2IC all the way up to a project manager, which I've done on a number of different projects, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. Again, the companies will assist you and provide you the support that you require. You're there just to manage.
Let's move on then to the evacuation of Afghanistan. I'm going to bite my tongue slightly about why it happened and the involvement of British politicians, some of whom were on holiday, didn't even think it was worthy of coming back to work when this was going on. How did that come about, and what was your role in that evacuation?
So initially I'd gone back over to Afghanistan in January 21, I think it was, off the top of my head. And I've been working in, again, different areas of operational management. I was a security manager at the time for a company called Garda World. We were providing different support networks, different outstation, different posts needed different operators in different systems. So I was there. I had a good 60-man security force that was providing security 24 hours, 7 days a week. And then I ended up working for about 5 months, 6 months straight. I ended up going out in the January and then coming back home in the June. But what had happened in that time was the position itself got dissolved that I was working. I was like, oh, here we go, out of a job. But luckily enough, I was asked by one of the guys, Kev McGregor, fantastic guy, fantastic operator. Worked with him on a couple of different projects. He assisted me in getting on with the Japanese embassy. I had an option of the Japanese embassy or the British embassy. So I came home, I was home for about 5 weeks, getting my security clearance, and then I went back out. And it was when I went back out, I think that was around, I came home in the June-ish time, end of June, and I was home for the July, and I went back out there in the August. And in the August, it was the Taliban had created chokeholds in and around Afghanistan itself, and I was working in Kabul, which was one of a major choke points, if you will. It's surrounded by mountains. Your airport, there's one way in, one way out, and that's, it was very difficult. And what they did was absolutely amazing. I mean, I've always said, the way that they worked the operation within a number of days, they circulated it, pushed everyone up to the choke point, and then controlled it all. And it was, again, I can't speak politically on this. I was there to do a job with the Japanese embassy, and I was only literally over there for 2 weeks when it all kicked off. We managed to evacuate 483 of the clients in total. Japanese embassy evacuated, the British embassy evacuated. Everyone was, evacuated securely and smoothly, but it was just the way things happened. It was a very militarised operation that the Taliban had. You could definitely see the skills that they'd picked up along the way from different training instructors, from different training camps, all over the world. The funding that they had, wherever that came from, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. And one of the points is that we not so much escaped, but or evacuated. We left with no losses. And that was a massive point. But it was very, very disappointing after 22 odd years, something like that, to leave a country that probably we shouldn't have even fucking been there. We should have left that country years and years ago.
Yeah. Well, I mean, historically, Afghanistan, nobody comes out of it well, do they?
No, they don't.
Not us, not the Russians,
no.
Nobody
Exactly.
at all.
But again, we were there to rebuild an infrastructure that unfortunately they don't want rebuilding. And some people do and some people don't. And unfortunately, it's the way that the Taliban want, because it's now under their rule. So.
And is it true, John, as far as you know, there was so much equipment left over by the Americans predominantly that, the Taliban have now got such sophisticated equipment out there that they'll just go from strength to strength?
They're unstoppable with what they had. They maybe took hold of all the security companies that were out there, and they've now got all their equipment. I certainly know that the company that I was working for, Gold World at the time, they had to leave all their equipment. There was probably over 2,000-3,000 different weapon systems that we had out there. We had armoured vehicles that we've all left behind. The infrastructure itself out there collapsed straight away, because they took control of everything, and they just came in nice and easy, and everybody laid down. And unfortunately, we're there to support everybody. We've got to provide protection for the people that are under us as well. The clients that we're working with, we can't provide them protection if we're getting shot because, we're non-compliant at the time. We're not listening to what's being said, but, they gave us the opportunity to extract out safely and in a safe and secure manner, and that's what we did. And that, we made sure that we were the last people that left. All the clients evacuated before we did, and then we got on the planes and we got out.
What would you say the Taliban, their opinion of Western society is now? Because we were just having a chat before the podcast, and we were sort of touching upon a number of what we might call modern day culture war type issues, which predominantly younger people are exposed to these days. How do you think they would see Western society? Fairly decadent, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. It's the way that the Taliban are actually operating. Again, I can't speak for everybody, but they have their own simple way of life, and that's what they want. They don't need to be westernised, and to be westernised means to break their cultural differences, and that's not what they're willing to do. You know, they want sheer law, and that's it. And that's what they've got. So eventually, you know, 22 years later, of all the losses, all the casualties that we've had, it's just fell by the wayside because we gave up. Or not us, we gave up, but, you know, we were there. We were fighting a war that probably didn't need to happen. We didn't need to lose these people. But again, we're there doing what we were told to be doing.
And just thinking of where the Afghanistan conflict came from, obviously 9/11 we sort of touched upon earlier, obviously orchestrated by Osama bin Laden, later found to be hiding out in Pakistan. Again, you don't have to answer this, John, but it's something I'm always interested in. We're led to believe that, one, he'd been in Pakistan undetected for many years, just literally round the corner from the head of the Pakistan military. We would therefore possibly deduce that he was being protected by certain individuals. Do you think he was there? Because obviously all we ever saw was Obama, Hillary Clinton looking into that monitor, special forces, which we don't see apart from some very grainy images going in, and then the next minute we're told that he's been buried at sea, so there's no evidence of a body.
Again, I'm not very political. I do believe that it was all umbrella. I do believe it was a smokescreen for something else to actually happen. I mean, if it happened, it happened. Do I believe it? I don't. I don't believe it at all. I don't believe that he was alive. I think they'd killed him a long time ago, and this was a smokescreen to then be able to go into somebody else's country. 9/11, again, I don't believe that could physically happen. Not with the armaments that America have got. You know, why would you allow two planes, let alone one, to come into that sort of area? It's not even the same flight path. You know, that would have been triggered a long time ago. A lot of the people that were on the planes, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn because, you know, for those people that lost their lives, again, you know, I'm truly sorry for something that happened, that sort of catastrophe, but some people weren't even alive on them planes, and I'm like, well, they died a long time ago. Again, there's a number of conspiracy theories, you know. I'm sure in a massive blast in one of those buildings, your passport is not going to survive. But luckily enough, it did, and that's what triggered this, you know, big catastrophic war that we then faced with sort of Afghanistan.
Well, I heard somebody say on the radio the other day, conspiracy theorists shouldn't really be called conspiracy theorists, possibly just theorists, because at least 50% seems to be proven right in the end anyway.
Well, that's it, exactly. There's always some truth behind a conspiracy theory. And the difference is, it's about being there and knowing, but I was never high enough to, you know, I was a sergeant when I left the British military itself back in 2010, but again, we were never high enough. We were there and we were told what we were doing, and we went and did the job that we were told we were doing, and that was it. You know, again, if there's more to it, the more to it with Tony Blair. There's blood on his hands.
100%, and this is the man who's pulling Keir Starmer's strings ahead of the next election next year, so very, very worrying.
Yeah, exactly.
5 minutes or so left, John. What does the future hold for you now?
So, again, currently I'm working away for a fantastic company over in Iraq that supports exactly what it is that we're there to be doing, the clients that we're operating with. I would like, realistically, to just get my house paid off, to be honest, and then look at coming back home, but it just depends on you know, what happens between now and sort of the next 5 to say 7 years. I've always looked at coming back home by the time I'm 50. Kids are getting older, moving schools and stuff. And again, just something that I wanted to touch on is the physical fitness and the mindset. You know, no matter where you are in life, you always need to have some sort of physical fitness and ability, whether that is just, you know, getting out, walking and stuff, as we discussed before. You know, I was fitness mad. You know, I had the greatest support from Big Zach, you know, when I was joining the military, and he always drummed it into me that you needed to keep fit. And that is one thing that I would suggest that people start, you know, thinking about at the minute. Because at the minute when I'm walking around, you know, the likes of Leicester, we're not far from an epidemic with sort of diabetes and stuff. Because, you know, people ain't taking care of themselves. And again, when we discussed about the youth clubs and stuff, these were prime supported, you know, networks where the kids were out playing football on the park. We had an itinerary. We were booked in to do stuff. We had youth clubs. We had, you know, access to leisure centres and facilities and stuff. And that's one thing that I would push on people is your mental health through that release of you know, physical activity. Because once you start getting that dopamine hit, that serotonin hit, you know, your life's right there. You can see, you've got clarity. And a lot of people don't have that because they just sit back and they just watch life pass.
Absolutely.
They're sat in the same pubs, in the same seats, doing the same thing, you know, years down the line. And that's, you know, unfortunately, we're losing people now. A lot of the characters in Leicester we're losing just through the fact that, you know, living an unhealthy lifestyle. And it's something that the government should be looking into, especially for the kids of today, because they've got nothing.
I never really understood why during COVID and post-COVID, again, we could talk about that separately as well, but healthy lifestyle wasn't really promoted. I mean, if at any time there was an opportunity to promote healthy eating, exercise, all of it was missed. It was all just about isolation, vaccination.
Exactly, isolation and vaccination. It weren't even promotion of, you know, the food produce, because everything else was, you know, feed your kids this and this is nice and easy. Well, you sat at home. Why don't you get your kids invested in doing something? Why don't you help your kids learn how to cook properly, cook proper food? But again, you've got this cost of living crisis. Everything went up. Everything went crazy in this lockdown. You know, you couldn't even go out and buy a bag of potatoes at some point because everything had been cleared off the shelves. No one wanted to come out.
Apparently all food comes from Ukraine. We never knew that before, did we?
That's some place to get your food.
Well, John, thanks ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. As you know, there's probably no bigger supporter of the armed forces than myself, so it really has been a privilege, and I do appreciate your time. And just keep safe when you go back out there, I think next week.
Thank you very much, Justin. It's been great to get the story out there. It's probably only about 50% of the story, but it's good to get the promotion of the British military and the backing of the government. You know, we need to do something for the young kids of today, which are losing out. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Brilliant. Legend. Thanks, John.
Thanks, mate.